Hey, what's going on guys? Chad here with Greenlight Shooting and welcome to this new video. So today we're going to be talking all about handgun calibers, specifically semi-automatic handgun calibers. Now I wanted to take the time to really make like a super basic video breaking these down because I remember what it was like just getting into guns and learning about these and being like overwhelmed. You know, there's so much information out there, so many different calibers. Where do you start? How do they rank up? If I just want to shoot, you know, for my first time, what one do I want to shoot? There's all these different questions and there's so much information out there. So I really wanted to break it down just to its core basics for you guys. So today we're talking about just the five kind of most basic standard semi-automatic handgun calibers that you're going to encounter. Now I feel like I'm going to get a little bit of hate from the more experienced gun guys out there for not going more in depth about these, but that's really not what this video is for. I don't want to overwhelm you. I just want to give you the basics so that you can go out and shoot and feel good about knowing which gun is which, what shoots what. So today we're talking about five different calibers. We've got the 22 long rifle, the 380 ACP, 9mm, 40 S&W, and 45 ACP. So that we can compare these a little bit better other than just looking at these, I want to talk about a couple different factors. But first of all, before we get into that, you have to know one thing. So this entire thing isn't necessarily the bullet. This is a round or a cartridge. So this here is either just your shell or your casing which holds your bullet. Now your bullet is just from here to here. This is the actual projectile that's going to be shot out of this casing. So when we're talking about these, I want to talk about the number one, the weight of that bullet. Now that's measured in grains, so we're going to talk about the different grains, the average grains for each of these calibers, as well as how fast that bullet is flying through the air. Because if you think about it, you're obviously going to have a lot more recoil if you're shooting a bigger caliber bullet that's flying faster. You know, that's going to send a lot of energy back your way when you shoot that gun versus shooting a really small bullet that's flying maybe not as fast. Okay, so now that we've covered those basics, let's dive into the calibers. Like I said, we've got five calibers here. Let's start just with the smallest one here. We have got the 22 LR or 22 long rifle. This thing's been around for a very long time. It's your standard plinking ammo. The reason people say that it's a plinking ammo is because it's generally very inexpensive, it's easy to find, and you know, if you're in the right location or whatever, you can just keep shooting it and not really have to worry about, you know, you're not spending too much money on it basically. So 22 long rifle it's a really common round because it can be shot out of rifles, out of semi-automatic handguns, as well as out of some revolvers. So it's a really versatile round, and you can see because of how small that bullet is. Just look at that, the size of that versus, you know, even like a 9mm. You can see we'll measure those two up right there. So we've got a 9mm right there, and we've got that 22 LR. You can see, just look at the bullet itself, how much smaller it is. So just to give you that frame of reference, the bullet here on a 22 LR measured in grains, it averages about 40 grains. So that's how heavy one of these is. Average feet per second, you're looking at maybe just over 1,100 feet per second. So 40 grains, about 1,100 feet per second. So next up is the 380 ACP. So this round is, it's obviously quite a bit bigger than that 22 LR you can see right here, but in terms of the 9mm, I like to measure things up compared to the 9mm because it's one of the more well-known calibers out there. But you can see in terms of height, it's much shorter, but it's actually pretty close in terms of diameter of the base. What's nice about the 380 ACP is it's similar to the 9mm, but it's actually just a little bit tamer. It's a little bit easier to shoot. So if you're someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience or something like that, a 380 is a great place to start if you just want that step up from a 22. You want a little bit bigger, more gun, but you don't want to fully step up. It's a little bit tamer version of a 9mm. One reason so many people like it is, you know, aside from it being a little bit easier to shoot than a 9mm, is it's a little bit smaller, meaning they can get into smaller guns. So gun manufacturers will oftentimes, you know, like those little, like the pocket guns and stuff that you see people using for concealed carry, a lot of times they're 380 because they can make those guns really, really small to accommodate this small yet deadly cartridge. So again, for that frame of reference, in terms of grains, in terms of the bullet weight, remember that bullet's just about right there. Average weight, about 90 grains for a 380 ACP. It's flying at about 1,000 feet per second. So it's obviously a little bit slower than that 22, but it's more than twice as much mass to that bullet. Next up, we've got the 9mm. This is definitely one of the most common calibers out there. It's widely used just for target shooting because it's so easy to shoot. It's also used a lot in self-defense because it's a really powerful round, and it's kind of that great marriage of accuracy and controllability, and also a lot of power behind it. So this is a great round for really most people. I mean, true beginners can start with 9mm, and as long as they have good fundamentals, they can learn very easily on a 9, but it's also a round that'll stand up to the best of shooters. They can really put it through its paces. It's just an all-around fantastic cartridge. Now again, we'll measure this up against the 22 LR. You can see it's significantly bigger than the 380 here. Now, to give you that frame of reference here, the weight on that bullet is generally about 115 grains. As I mentioned, it can always go up or down from there, but 115 grains is a pretty standard size for a 9mm. And then the speed at which it's flying through the air is about 1,250 feet per second. So the projectile flies fast, and it's got enough mass to really do a lot of damage in terms of self-defense. Next up is the 40 S&W. This is a big favorite amongst a lot of concealed carry people and stuff like that because it packs a lot of punch. Because of that though, it's not great to shoot. Especially for beginners, you're gonna have a lot harder time getting used to this because there's a lot of snap in the recoil. This is a significantly larger bullet. This one is about 165 grains versus that 115 grains of a 9mm. So it's a much heavier bullet, and it's flying at about 1,150 feet per second. So a little bit slower, but that bigger bullet is making for a little bit snappier of a recoil. Recommendations for the 40, I'd say if you're a beginner, maybe stay away from it for now. I wouldn't recommend getting your first gun as a 40 or anything like that. Even though it is a great round for self-defense, it's hard to control. So I'd say get your fundamentals down with another caliber, and then you can move into the 40 if that's something that you like. And finally, we've got the big boy. This is the 45 ACP. Now, don't pay any attention here to the top. This is just a hollow point version. I didn't have any of the standard full metal jacket kind of ball ammo like you saw on the other ones. But of course, they do make that in 45 ACP, that ball ammo style. This is just, it's a hollow point. So don't worry about that. We're just talking about the sheer size of this beast right now. So this is it next to a 9mm. Remember that 9mm was about 115 grains of the bullet or so. This one, you're looking at a standard of maybe about 230 grains. So this thing is huge. It's about twice as much as the standard 9mm. So that's a big heavy projectile that's flying through the air. Because of how heavy it is though, it's gonna fly significantly slower at around 850 feet per second. 45 is a big favorite in terms of concealed carry because a lot of people like to know that big projectile is there to protect them, and when that thing hits something, it's really going to do a lot of damage. Of course, along with that bigger projectile comes more recoil. So there is a significantly more recoil in a 45 than a 9mm. However, it's been said a lot that like a 45, because of its slower feet per second at only 850, it's sort of got more of a push recoil than something like this 40 S&W I was talking about last time. That, whereas it's a big bullet and it's flying really fast, that's got that snap. That's really hitting you. This 45, it's a little bit slower, and you can kind of feel that in the recoil. It's interesting. It's still not something that I would recommend as your first gun. Of course, there are always gray areas, but for the most part, once you get your fundamentals down on maybe like a 9mm or something like that, stepping up to a 45 is a lot easier. So as a quick recap, we've got 22 LR, we've got 380 ACP, 9mm, 40 S&W, and 45 ACP. I hope this was insightful and gave you just a little bit better understanding of these different calibers. In terms of price, the 22 LR is by far going to be your most inexpensive option. Next up is probably going to be your 9mm, whereas that's such a widely used round. You can find it pretty cheaply. Next, I would say is probably the 380. And then you've got the 40 S&W after that, and most expensive is the 45 ACP. So that's something you do want to keep in mind. If you buy a gun in a certain caliber, you want to keep in mind how much it's going to cost you to keep shooting it and training with it. So yeah, I hope that video was insightful and gave you a little more information and confidence into sort of how these guys stack up against each other. So when you go into a gun store or you go to the range or something like that, you can have a little more confidence. You can know what to expect out of each of these calibers. Keep in mind, as mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are a lot more calibers than this, and these will vary a lot. I just wanted to give you guys a real basic breakdown into kind of what you can expect on each of these different calibers. If this video helped you out, please hit that thumbs up button for me. That helps me out a bunch. Share this video if you think it might help anyone else out. If you have any other questions, leave them down in the comments below. We've got a great community here of really helpful people. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more videos coming. I like doing these basic beginner videos as well. You know, I want to do one for revolver ammunition, for rifle ammunition, shotgun ammunition, all that good stuff. So anyways, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't seen these other two videos, please check them out, and we'll see you on the next one for Green Light Shooting.